Hey guys, right now I'm looking at the Bitcoin USD chart. I'm still in a long trade I was in from earlier today that I uploaded as part of the Bitcoin Trading Journal series. As you can see, price is sort of just pretty much oscillated around my entry point for a few hours, actually several hours, the greater part of a day. Um, it's not my preferred scenario. You know, um, I generally like to see that initial reaction, whether it be my invalidation or my first take profit. Um, but you can't always get that. So the market's always giving you opportunities to be patient. So you might as well just exercise that patience and see how this thing plays out. But actually, this video is not part of a trading journal series. I actually wanted to take the time today to talk about a separate topic, the topic of journaling. Something recently happened, just to kind of reiterate the importance of journaling. Um, I have this Amazon tab opened up. Got the pretty decent leather journal. This might not be the exact replica that I have that I use, but it's very similar. Um, I like the old rustic feel. Um, something that engages all the senses when you use it. Um, and it really has the feel of a tome or some type of religious scripture. And while that might sound ridiculous, it's I think it's kind of appropriate in the sense that some of your parameters, your edge, your entry, your exit, the different methodologies you use in your trading, your trading program, those should really be treated like religious practices, and attended with the same force of habit, the same rituals, and the same blind faith in a sense. That whatever's written down in your tome or your journal or sort of etched into there, so to speak, those shouldn't be violated, right? So it's almost a sacred text. Um, so that's why I prefer to use that old tome. But whatever works for you. Some people just write in a Microsoft Word document. That works too. I mean, really, the idea is to write, right? Whether that's physically writing or typing. But it's not only to write down the parameters of your trade, but it's also to document, how you're feeling at the time of the trade. And it's especially true when you're not feeling great. But it's also important to document times where you are feeling great, or maybe you're in a huge winning trade. You just made a home run trade, or you're in a winning streak. Um, maybe you're bordering on the edge of euphoria. That would be also a good time to kind of start journaling and start documenting your experiences. And the idea is that you want to journal these. You really want to journal the extremes in emotional affect, just because those are the areas where things can go wrong. And if there's any error in some of your methodology or your execution, like it'll become more apparent as you get off toward the extremes of emotions, whether that be positive or negative. If you think about your emotions as like a standard deviation bell curve, right? As you approach the extremes, then that's likely where the errors in execution are going to mount. And as errors in execution mount, then that's also where the emotions can spiral out of control. For me personally, I've found huge benefit in journaling, and particularly journaling on the macro. Kind of writing down my feelings as it pertains to, especially I do it mainly for the Bitcoin market, but you can do it for any market. Um, you know, you, for me, journaling about the macro and how I feel in relationship to where macro market structure is, over time, that has been very illuminating for me, because I go back on those times and I've realized that my my emotions are almost always contrary to the realities that exist in the market. And if you go back and look at it, my emotions are almost the mirror opposite of what I would, you'd want to be feeling during those times, right? Maybe I'm bullish towards the top of the market, and feeling bearish or fearful while the market's putting in a bottom. It's pretty classic. I mean, the markets. That's generally what the markets do. So it's not crazy to be experiencing those types of patterns, but it is helpful to document them, just because if you put it on paper and then you see the same pattern play out over and over, then you can identify it in the future, and like, okay, this is what's happening. And instead of, you can't really not experience those emotions. You're still a human being. You're still, you have the same set of biology and hardwiring as everybody else. But so you can't really divorce yourself from that. But what you can do is you can identify the feeling, and you can uh, put precautions or limitations in place so that feeling does not influence your behavior in any way. And that's a really key distinction, right? We can feel whatever, however we feel, whatever way we wake up in the morning, but so long as it doesn't influence our behavior, then we don't have an issue, right? um, I have a mentor, so to speak, some much older professional trader who used to trade on the floor of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, CME Group, back in the 90s. I won't drop his name, but he essentially worked on the floor back in the 90s, before really, that was back during the pit times, where people would stand on the floor and make hand signals. And in that time, like, an edge was literally being physically bigger than everybody else, and being able to edge in to the market and place those orders or shout over other people. So while computers weren't as, you know they were still trading order flow, and he would buy order flow from different brokers who were providing that data, and he would trade that essentially, of course, and price data as well. So they didn't have TradingView back then, but of course, people were constantly documenting price and drawing levels off price, and incorporating order flow to that and trading that. And one of the interesting things that he mentioned to me, after we've had multiple conversations, but one of the things that really stuck with me was, I asked him. I said, his name's Bob. I said, Bob, what's the one piece of advice that you would give me above everything else? And he kind of looked at me and he said, look, kid, don't ever trust your gut. Don't ever trust your gut. And that really stuck with me, because I kind of thought that when you become a professional trader, you sort of hit this point where your gut sort of becomes enlightened, or evolved, or whatever. That it's sort of, you hit a point where it starts to steer you correctly. Um, and maybe for some people it does, but it was just interesting hearing from a professional trader saying never trust it. Right? There's no enlightened state. Um, and you always have to be skeptical. You still have the same biology as everybody else, the same hardwiring. Um, and journaling can really help you identify those patterns. Again, especially at the extremes of you know of the emotional states. You know, it, sometimes if you think about your the psychological aspects of trading, and we recently just started a psychological series that you guys might find interesting. And we cover a broad range of topics, and there's a lot of topics to cover. But an interesting thing about that is that there's a number, maybe 3 dozen different psychological aspects that, if any of them are off or even incongruent in a slight bit, that can throw your whole execution off. Right? It's like, kind of, if you have like a database of code, and there's one line of code that's wrong, or something's wrong with it, it can mess up the whole database. So it's a very similar concept with trading, and journaling is a great way to, when you revisit it, and after you've developed beyond that, you can sort of get a little bit more clarity, and it helps you straighten out those glitches in your trading code, so to speak. And everyone I know who's done it has found it very enlightening, and something that they look back on with fondly, and they're really glad that they put in the time to journal and to document everything. So anyway, if you aren't journaling, at least give it a thought. Um, yeah, I think I'll upload another video on this just because it's such an important topic. But yeah, just if you don't already have a journal, grab it or start documenting.